Hi, welcome to the See You Try show. As always, we are the show designed. I'm Karen Sims, and I'm the director of the Trauma and Resiliency Initiative, and we've been working to try to make Champaign County a trauma and justice-informed community. We receive resources and support from the Champaign County Mental Health Board and the Champaign Coalition. So that's always the commercial that I want to get out there. And I am super excited to have a great guest, Kim Bryan, and I've known Kim for a while. And she actually will tell you guys don't know this, but as a part of our working group, Kim was the first person to volunteer to be on the show, and it has taken us a while to get her on. So thank you, Kim. I'm finally able, and what an appropriate month. And I also want to remind the audience that the views and opinions of Kim are her own and not the funders or mine. And so feel free to say whatever. So Kim, welcome. And I will let you do your own introduction. What would you like to tell us about yourself and your organization?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me. It is a rather appropriate month for me to be here. September is Suicide Prevention Month. And I do suicide prevention work in the community. So just a little bit about myself and my background. So previous work I have done in community advocacy, working with different populations. I have degrees in psychology and sociology and studied, systems of inequality, particularly in education, was kind of my area of focus while I was in school. And then I had the very unfortunate experience when I was working on my doctorate degree that my oldest son died of suicide. Lots of things happened. I was unable to stay and finish my degree at school, but I kind of started doing work in the community for suicide prevention. This wasn't necessarily something that I set out to do, really just started with my daughter wanting to do some awareness things at her school. She was in high school at the time that my son died, and she wanted to do some suicide prevention things in her school. And so I wanted to be a supportive mom, right, and support my child in what she was wanting to do. And as, started talking to people through that and just in the community in general, and really started to see that there was a need for suicide prevention services in this community. It wasn't something that anyone was really providing. People who, I heard from a lot of people who really wanted to be helpful to those who may be experiencing suicide, wanted to be able to support them, but didn't really know how to do that. And so we started to see that there was a need for education. People wanted to know, what can I do to be, a supportive, helpful person? And so started working on, creating programs where we could teach people how to do that, essentially, how to talk about suicide, how to be supportive of somebody who, is experiencing suicide. And I think it's just kind of one of those things that happened because, I had the personal experience that sort of put me in that position, but I also had, an educational background and a professional background that gave me the skills to be able to do that. So it kind of became a situation where, seeing this is something that the community needs, and I am able to do this, right? So I need to do this and provide this service to the community. So we started this organization. Can you
tell us the name? So, because
Sure.
You didn't plug it yet, and then I got a couple questions for you.
So our organization is called Rattle the Stars. And we do a variety of suicide prevention services. We do consultation to help people understand within their school, their business, their religious institution, their community group, how they can more effectively help with suicide prevention. We also do education and training. So we teach people how to intervene and support somebody who's experiencing suicide. And then we also do various events in the community to be out there talking about it, to let people know that this is something that we can discuss, and provide that support and resources when they need it.
So why Rattle the Stars?
The name?
Yeah.
So the name Rattle the Stars, it comes from an older Disney movie called Treasure Planet. It's a little personal. It was one of my son's favorite movies, and it's kind of this underdog story about, you know, this boy who is always messing things up and ruining things, but then in the end of the movie, he ends up kind of saving the world for everyone. And so one of the characters at the end of the movie tells him, you know, you're something special. You're going to rattle the stars. And so that phrase, rattle the stars, means to change the world, to have an impact on the world. And so it really kind of resonated for what we were hoping to do with the organization when we founded it. You know, really kind of this idea, it's twofold. So first of all, we wanted this to be a message to people who, you know, are experiencing thoughts of suicide or, you know, are affected by that in some way through their loved ones. We wanted people who are in that position to know, you know, you are something special. You are important to this world. You matter in this world. And you know, you change the world for people just by being here, right? Just your being here is important. So it's kind of a message in that regard, but then we also think of it as a message to people who want to learn and be helpful and be that supportive person, that it's an understanding that you don't have to do, you know, big, huge things, right? It doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of effort. It's really just about making those connections with the people in your life that you care about and talking to them and learning how to be that supportive person. And when you do that, when you just do those small everyday things, you change the world for a lot of people. You know, you make their world better, and every time, you know, we can do this and help someone find the support that they need so that we can prevent a death from suicide, that person still being here changes the world for all of the people who love them. So that's what it means. That's where it comes from.
Love it. I'm so happy I took the time to ask you that question. You were like, it's, and I have another sort of question I've been sort of ruminating over, and it's linked to something you said just a second ago. So, was wondering, of course, then I lost it. Because it was off my script. I was like, it wasn't one of the questions I had thought about. So we'll come back to it. Okay. So given all of the sort of, oh, I know, it's back. Sorry. I know a little bit about your journey to establish Rattle the Stars, and you sort of were there where you were sort of talking about resilience. And I think, and so educate me, if one of the reasons why you started your own organization and didn't take a package program that existed someplace else was you felt like there was a deficit or there wasn't a complete narrative in the rest of the sort of array. Can you talk about kind of what you saw out there and how people might typically approach this issue, and a little bit about Rattle the Stars' sort of unique flavor and broader approach to the work? So
sure, absolutely. So like I said, when I started doing this, we really just, you know, recognized this need that people wanted to learn, what should I do? So we heard from a lot of people that, you know, I want to be helpful, but I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. And so we really wanted to provide that education to people. So what I did was started looking around at programs that were out there, that were available, just thinking that we'll just invite something to the school, to the community, do the trainings, and provide that service. Unfortunately, what I found when I started looking at programs was they were insufficient in some ways. So first of all, many of them didn't address what people were telling me that they needed, right? They didn't really address that aspect of, I don't know how to talk about this. I don't know what to say. I'm uncomfortable. I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. And a lot of people have that fear when talking about suicide. It's this idea that if I say something wrong, I'm going to push this person, right, that direction. And so, and that fear is very real for people. So they end up saying nothing. Unfortunately, a lot of the programs that are out there, they didn't really address that. They didn't really give a lot of direction on how to talk about it and what to say. So that was something that we wanted to provide. The second really important thing was that programs that I looked at were very one size fits all. So it was very much this, this perspective that intervention is the same for everybody, no matter who you're supporting. And we know that that's not the case. That's not the case at all. There was no cultural awareness. There was no difference for people in different communities, for people from different cultural groups. And, with my background studying, systems of inequality, including race and gender and class, I understood really well that this is not good enough. Right? If we're not giving people things that they feel are going to be beneficial to them, that resonate with them in their cultural groups that they'll be able to use, then we're doing a disservice. We're not giving them anything that they can use. And so I really wanted to create a program that addressed those issues, that was more culturally aware and understood that suicide intervention looks different for different people in different communities. We can't just use the same things for everyone. It's not effective when we do that.
So I thank you for clarifying, and I hope the audience hears sort of how those elements are so important, particularly in this time. And so when I reached out to you and we were aware, like, it's National Suicide Prevention Month, we were also aware that it's happening in this broader culture climate, right? And so it's a time of protest, and we've got a pandemic, and we've got a bunch of different things. Are there, based on your reading and awarenesses, are there emerging issues related to suicide that we should be aware of or thinking about? Does this increase risk factors? Right, help educate us about what we should be attending to, and we can sort of take each of those issues separately or lump them all together.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's start talking about COVID, right? Because
Okay.
that is affecting all of our lives in many ways right now. And there's a lot of discussion in the media and people talking amongst in their communities about the fear that all of our public health responses to try to control the virus are then going to lead to an increase in mental illness and suicide.
Yep.
So our responses were having to have people stay home, right? Our stay-at-home orders, closing businesses, closing restaurants, canceling events, people working from home, schools closed, that all of those actions have a negative effect on people's mental health. They can increase stress, right? And this is very much the case. All of those responses can increase people's feelings of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty about what's happening, what's going to happen in the future, disruptions in our daily lives, right? And for a lot of families in our community are really struggling with this, trying to manage their jobs and educating their children from home at the same time. This is a really stressful situation. Additionally, there's a lot of unemployment, right?
Yeah, I was going to say
a lot
there's
of
jobs or lack
unemployment.
of jobs. So we were thinking the same way. Absolutely.
Yes. So absolutely, when we start closing down businesses and people are laid off and people lose their jobs, and then of course that leads to food insecurity. With the addition of schools being closed and students who rely on schools for meals throughout the day, that becomes, increases food insecurity for those students, housing insecurity, people who can't pay their rent. And then on top of that, just the social isolation, right? We're all, staying apart, not being able to be with friends and family, being home by ourselves, not having activities and events and things to go out and do, increases, those feelings of isolation and loneliness. So it is a difficult situation, right? And when we look at all of this, we go, well, yes, this is going to increase stress for people. That leads to, increased, symptoms of depression, of anxiety, PTSD. A lot of these negative mental health effects come from this. Also increase, alcohol and drug use, unfortunately. A lot of people who use that as a coping skill and are under additional stress, it becomes a bigger issue. We've had an increase in drug overdoses since the pandemic started. And so there's a lot of fear that all of these things are going to lead to this dramatic increase in suicide. This has unfortunately been something that has been used to try to combat stay-at-home orders and shutdowns, to say, well, we can't be shut down because then people are going to die of suicide. And that's not really the best way that we want to think about things. We're not trying to trade, different types
miseries, right? COVID versus
right. I mean, it's not like we're going to try to prevent suicides by letting people die of COVID. That's not the right way to approach it. So what we want to understand is that, yes, the risk factors are there for suicide, but this is not inevitable, right? Just like risk factors are increasing, we can increase protective factors as well. So historically, when we have, had situations that increase a lot of risk for suicide, such as economic downturns, the recession, even the previous pandemic in 1918, when we have those sort of large, broad social circumstances that increase risk, there's not always an increase in suicide. It doesn't always happen that way. So one of the things that also happens is what we call this kind of pulling together effect, right? So it's this idea that even though everything is really bad right now, it's really bad for all of us, right? We're all in a really bad situation together. So it doesn't feel so alone and overwhelming when we know that everyone else is experiencing that too. Plus, a lot of our messaging around, mitigation efforts for the pandemic, for example, like the All in Illinois, right? Encouraging this idea that we're all in this together. We can all do our part to help, stop the spread of the virus and keep our community healthy. And so in that way, even though things are really, really bad and stressful, we're doing it together and we're coming together as a community. So that effect helps to offset some of those risk factors.
Gotcha. And so I want to make sure that we sort of drilled that down, because I know that is one of the things that you stressed in your presentations and workshops, that one of the things that we can do in the prevention strategies, and I'm sure you're going to talk about other issues, is to really think about this from a risk and a protective factor strategy. And risk factors can be both individual and systematic and structural. And so to think in, familiar and all of those various levels, and protective factors can be on all those. So it's not just like the focus on the individual. You like to make sure that people are thinking about all those rings of support, and to be thinking about how do we keep people with more protective factors than risk factors. And so I really appreciate you sort of highlighting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for me, this was was some of the things I was watching unfold as things, happened very quickly in the spring. I mean, we had a lot of changes very quickly, but looking at the way that people jumped right away to recognizing the protective factors that were needed. So, saw things where people were coming up with systems and ways to connect people with, people who needed someone to grocery shop for them or to run errands for them or do things. People who, were dealing with food insecurity, and there was a great outpouring of donations to food pantries, and our schools stepped up and we figured out how to still distribute meals to those kids who and the families who needed them. Thinking about financial assistance that our government provided, the extra unemployment benefits, the $1,200 stimulus that everyone received. Not that those things, are answered everyone's issues, but it helps a little. It helps some people in some ways. The moratorium on evictions and foreclosures to help keep people in their housing. And so these things for the short term are beneficial. It helps to protect from some of that stress where people can feel like, these things they're getting the support that they need right now, right? They're the day-to-day things that people need. Hopefully they're helping to receive from the community. And so, it's one thing that I love about our community, watching the ways that the community stepped up and tried to provide that support that was needed. I think the fear that we have now, though, is as things are ongoing, right? We still need to address these things because sure, we've stopped evictions right now, but what's going to happen when those start? And utility shutoffs are not happening right now, but what's going to happen later when those pick up and those bills come due? And so I think that that's where we again have to think about protecting our community. We don't just want to create a situation where we're delaying this for a later point in time, and then once again all of these things are going to come crashing down on people. So this is where it's really we have an opportunity to to step up, to reimagine the way that we provide services to our community. We have an opportunity for our community members to step up and demand the things that people need. So hopefully, as we go forward, our political or elective leaders will continue to keep an understanding of what families need right now. But I honestly believe that as we go forward, our community is going to continue to try to come together and support support the people who need it. So, and that as well is also part of that pulling together effect, right? So those people who are in that position that have a lot of needs related to, food, finances, housing, those things, when they see people in the community coming out to support them, it helps to offset those feelings of loneliness, right? That people don't feel so alone. They feel that others care about them. They feel that others are supporting them. Even if it doesn't quite address all of their problems, it's important for that social connection, that they feel that connection to their community, that people are supporting them and care about their well-being.
Wow. Right. I'm hoping the audience really hears that clearly, that the intersections between our social policy and caring for each other. And, I do a pitch for having community wellness, right? One of the reasons why I want us to be a resilient and trauma-informed community is that we're building the capacity to support people. So into that, because I know you sort of hinted at the justice issues. You also wanted to talk about the inequities and the inequalities and how might those be sort of showing up and manifesting in this phase. Like, what are you noticing? Are there specific issues? But again, are the protests, what's the mix?
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot going on right now for for the Black community, right? When we think about COVID, first of all, and talking about inequality and injustice, I think it's very well known that this is impacting Black and Brown communities more than it is white communities. So first of all, Black and Brown people are more likely to be essential workers. They're also more likely to lose their jobs in many ways. But being in that position when they're essential workers, and there's that fear of the virus, fear of getting sick, fear of death, fear of spreading it to your family, but being in that position where my job has not been stopped, so I have to go to work even in these conditions. That is significant stress on people that are, and we talk about frontline workers a lot, but we have to remember a lot of our frontline workers are minimum wage workers. They're the people working in retail and our restaurants that we're able to still stay open and provide drive-through and pickup services, and even in our hospitals and places like that, the people who are doing the cleaning and the laundry and all of those things. And they're really on the front lines as well. So this is a significant stressor to them. But of course we know because of racial injustice in health in general, unfortunately, Black and Brown people have been more likely to catch the virus, to contract COVID, to have serious complications and be hospitalized. And unfortunately, they've experienced more death. There is a much higher death rate for Black and Brown people as compared to white people. And so that is an additional, great stress on the community that people are more likely to know someone who has died. They are more likely to have lost a family member. So we have this situation, unfortunately, where we have a lot of this shared traumatic grief and death over people in the community, family members and friends who have died of COVID. So this is a significant additional stress that is on, specifically Black and Brown communities. And then through, while we're going through COVID, we are also going through this period of a lot of social unrest and protests. And this is something, again, that is another stressor. So Black communities have these kind of additional, stresses happening all at the same time. And so we'll kind of talk a little bit about the protests now, I think, kind of shift and talk about that specifically, because in the midst of all of this worry about disease and the pandemic, we have, Black people who are out here, protesting for their right to life, right? Protesting.
Model UN out there protesting, right? Like it has been racially diverse and culturally diverse,
right?
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. And it's, and then again, a lot of that criticism is falling on this, you're doing this during a pandemic. But it has to be done during a pandemic because people are dying during a pandemic still in other ways. Right. So, unfortunately, we all know what prompted the protests, the video of the death of George Floyd. This was, another in a long line of deaths of, Black people at the hands of police. And so we have to understand the impacts of those videos on people in the Black community. It's a situation where when we see these videos, right, time and time and time again, that creates a lot of traumatic stress for people. Seeing the videos of Black bodies, being harmed and killed at the hands of police officers is extremely traumatic. The unfortunate situation that we have is this is increasing symptoms of depression and anxiety and PTSD in Black people, especially young Black boys who see these videos of Black men being treated this way.